Let's be real. A lot of us feel like champions in the boardroom, but yet when we go home, we feel like complete imposters. We can nail that presentation. We can hit all those KPIs at work. We can be on it. But the moment we walk through that door at home, that look from our spouse or that response from our child, we find out that, you know what, I'm not really that qualified. At work, you have a playbook. But when it comes time to go home, your vulnerability is exposed. And there are many men that I work with, that I coach and I talk with. And at some point in each of our lives, there are moments where we're asking that silent question: why do I feel like such a fraud in my own home? What I want to do is let you know, brothers, that you're not alone here. And what we're going to do for a little time during this episode is dive into what exactly that may look like and how we can overcome that. And we're going to also do that by just realizing that we can step into our leadership at home without pretending, without performing. And dare I say, we can make sure that we are not succumbing to the pressures of having to feel perfect. Brother, you're not alone. And today, what I want you to understand is that what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we can actually work through that. So that way you don't feel like you have to keep pretending, that you don't have to keep performing. Understand that you don't have to succumb to the pressures of always feeling as if you have to be perfect. In the last episode, we talked about the power of vulnerability. And in that conversation, one of the things that hopefully you were left with is the idea that you don't always have to be perfect. And our view of what masculinity is not necessarily the best view. As a matter of fact, I talked a little bit about the whole idea of toxic masculinity. And it's that idea when it comes to leadership at home, recognizing it's not about dominance, not even about perfection. And the thing about it is we have to recognize that I always thought as a leader growing up that leadership was synonymous with perfect, with flawless, without any types of faults. One of the things I recognize here is that leadership is not about that, never struggling. It's not about never being in a situation where you are always perfect. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've come to understand is that there is power in being authentic. Here's another thing that I've learned too. And keep in mind, this is taking from close to 16 years of marriage, as well as close to 14 years of being a dad. Your family is not looking for a king. They're looking for a shepherd. Think about it. King directs people. They command people. They demand respect. A king is the type of person that controls outcomes, whereas a shepherd guides. They protect. They listen. They watch. They care, right? And so when you think about it, understand what role it is that you're supposed to play. You're supposed to be the provider. You're supposed to make sure that there's a safe space. Make sure that the lights are on, make sure that the bills are paid, right? Make sure that they know that if there is anybody in the world that is not going to protect them, that you're going to be the one to protect them. A leader at home is a guide. They're constantly taking them through a journey. I think about just when one of the things I always talk about is how little Mike was the first kid I actually really cared for. Now, I want to make sure that some of my old youth group folk, they may be watching this, and listen, I cared about all of you. I loved you as my own. And so I want you to hear my heart with that. But at the end of the day, I could send you back to your parents. My sister and I are 5 years apart. So by the time she was born, I definitely wasn't changing diapers. Little Mike was the first diaper I ever changed. And there was some fear and trepidation that came along with it because I was worried that I was going to jack things up. And one of the things that I'm always amazed at is that my son, because of the fact that I really have been intentional about being just a dad to him, he enjoys my company. And one of the things that's been fun is along the way, having to teach him about different things, about guiding him through little things that it's been so long since I was a kid. I didn't realize that I had to learn it at some point too. There was one situation where this was during the pandemic, I want to say. And we were starting to really teach him about the power of chores and responsibility around the home. And I grew up in a home, no shade, no tea, but I grew up in a home where, you didn't really ask too many questions, right? It wasn't so much when they say jump, you just start jumping. But You definitely didn't ask questions. And so there was a point where we were getting ready to finish with our dinner. And I said, Mike, once you get done, I want you to go ahead and take my plate and take your mom's plate and clean it off. And he looked a little disturbed. And those of you know what I'm talking about here, especially the older dads, you know what I'm talking about, where there's that moment where I don't know if just the testosterone is just at its peak, but we all have that phase where we just, we think we're going to challenge our dad. It happens to all of us. I know I did. I don't remember most of it because I think I was unconscious for a piece of it. But in all seriousness, I had always been ramping up to when is that day going to happen? When Shavella had been bracing for it, and I'm sitting there bracing for it. And the way he looked, I was like, oh, this may be that moment. This may be the moment. And so then I said, what's going on? Why are you upset? And he said, I just don't understand. Now, that wasn't happening where I was growing up, but I was curious. I said, you don't understand. And he was like, I don't mind taking mine away, but I don't understand why you and mommy can't take yours away. And I'm gonna tell y'all something, that it was that moment where I just was like, "Ooh, am I getting punked here? Is this the moment?" I'm thinking, "Is this the event?" I even saw Shavela shift just uncomfortably in her seat because he was like, "Maybe this is the time." And the Holy Spirit came upon me, and I just sat and listened. And as I listened, I started recognizing that, you know what? He was simply just asking a question. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He wasn't trying to be belligerent. He really just genuinely wanted to know. Fellas, I want you to understand something, that for some of us, that right there is a paradigm shift. That's a difference in how we were raised, right? And so understand that when it talks about leadership at home, our role is to be a guide. We're not a dictator, right? We're there. And here's the bigger piece of it. Leadership is about our presence and not about our performance. See, you're present, you're there, you're being in the home. You're not performative. You're not just doing things for the sake of doing it. When you think about that whole concept of performance, right? You don't have to be performative. You don't have to impress anybody. I've had a couple of leadership positions in my career, and there was one particular time I remember coming home and I just brought work home with me. And at one point, my wife, and she was real good about it. She said, are you talking to me as Michael, the husband, or are you talking to me as Michael, the chief learning officer? And that was her not so subtle way of just letting me know, you get ready to cross that line. So I'm just going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and rewind and go ahead and fix something. And so that was true. That was a moment, and it really stuck with me. And it helped me understand the idea of I don't have to perform. When I'm working with different types of leaders, one of the things I always have to say to them is, if you have to constantly remind people of what your role is, maybe, just maybe, you're not in the place that you think you are. What would I be like just walking through the door? Hey, guess what? I'm the dad. I'm the head of the house. I'm walking through the door. They know this. Like, it's already a known thing, right? So you don't have to perform anything. You just be. You just do what it is you're supposed to do. Here's the other piece about understanding leadership at home. It is emotional steadiness. It's not emotional control. It's about humility. It's not about hierarchy. One of the things I was thinking about when I was really putting ideas together for this episode was there was a moment at home, went to my parents' house. I think we were having dinner or something, and we were sitting around laughing and joking. And when you get to the point when you can start confessing to some of the things that you did when you were younger. And now that I'm a parent, I'm starting to understand that there were times where I thought I was getting away with something that I actually wasn't. But it is what it is. And so we were just talking about how my dad was a disciplinarian, and we laughed about some of the things and how he was strict about certain things. And then at some point in the conversation, his demeanor changed and he went from just joyful, gleeful to a little more serious. And he said, we did the best we could with what we knew. We did the best we could with what we knew. And that, till this day, really sticks to me. Your authority at home comes from your consistency, not from your competence. I'm going to say that again. Your authority at home comes from your consistency, not from your competence. Here's the truth. Leadership at home is not about having all the answers. It's about showing up with the right heart. I think about one of the best examples of this, especially when we're talking about that whole idea of a king versus a shepherd, is one of the shepherds of the Bible, David, right? He was actually considered a man after God's own heart. And I tell you what, if there was anybody that I'm sure at some point in his life felt like he was a fraud, it was David. And one of the things that we saw, all the history of David, you can go through all the resume of just the issues that David had. At the end of the day, he was still considered a man after God's own heart. And in many churches, if you're not a part of church, you may not understand this part. But those of us who are part of church, we understand praise and worship like it's a big deal in our churches. He was the writer of many of the Psalms that were the Psalms of praise. And the idea that he was a man that, regardless of all the stuff that he had going on in his life, he still had the intention to be a man after God's own heart. And so with that, one of the things that I think about is the idea of that strategic vulnerability, right? Putting yourself in a posture where you can actually take ownership of some of the stuff that you've done, right? Some of the things that you've been a part of. Your wife does not need a perfect husband. Your wife does not need a perfect husband. She needs an honest one. Your kids do not trust the father who pretends. They trust the father who is present. Let me show you what that looked like for me. And I'm going to just be real with you all. I can't tell you to go ahead and be vulnerable and I not be vulnerable with you. I know the feeling of being a fraud, of feeling like you're a fraud. When I think back of the years when life was squeezing me financially, I made some mistakes. I borrowed some money from some folk with the true intention of paying it back. And I didn't get around to that. Rented from people and missed rent, people who trusted me a lot. And in those instances, all of it, I always intended to pay it back. And I believed I could pay it back, but then life starts crushing and the years go by. And it didn't stop there. My family lived in houses we couldn't afford. And I'm thinking we're going to catch up. And then we ended up leaving owing money. And I disappointed people I never wanted to hurt. And I want you to know that the shame that I feel, even just talking about it now, still comes back. And that shame actually would sit in and make me feel like, man, I am not competent enough to lead other people. How can I lead other people? And I can't even lead myself or lead my family. It just felt like a fraud. And I want you to hear my heart when I say this. My pastor, Bishop Johnson, he always says this. He says, we praise God for grace and mercy. And understand, though, that the grace and the mercy does not exempt you from consequences, right? The results of the action. But at the same token, it's that grace and that mercy that allows us to have the freedom to not have to live in that bondage, right? Yes, right? There's some relationships that may never heal as a result of some of the decisions I made in the past. Yes, there are some other things that even now, as I'm later on and a lot more mature, it may not necessarily be back to what it was. But at the same time, can't live in that. And it's not being a fraud. It's just being in a place of what? Trying to live beyond your capacity. It's not fraud. It's overextending, right? It's immaturity. It's fear. It's pride, right? And hiding from it will make you feel like a fake, but owning it will make you be a leader. And so that's why vulnerability matters at home. Not to dump, not to excuse, but to lead from truth. Because here's the deal. Your family actually, they want to follow you, and they want to follow you not because you're perfect. So to that point, one of the things that I want to leave you with is making sure that as we're going into this world and that's our lives, that you understand that small, consistent conversations can be what we do. A lot of times we think that we have to have these big, grandiose things and all these things. And no, you know what? To be honest with you, it starts with just being intentional. One of the things that I started doing is being very intentional about just making sure that whenever I'm home, whenever I can, I try to have dinner with my family, right? Yes, we get caught up in business. Sometimes I have to go literally from my full-time gig to my part-time behind the scenes building this stuff. And there are times where I may be doing a virtual meeting or a training or something. I have to be in my office to get ready for that. So I may eat dinner there. But when I can, I do make it a point to sit out there with them and just be. Sometimes it's just a matter of just being, right? Where I learned that powerful lesson from, and I want you to hear me when I say this, I actually learned it From early on, my parents had a dog. His name was Smokey. And he was our family dog. Actually, he was a dog that we inherited from my grandmother, who then passed on. She got sick and then she eventually passed on. And so we ended up taking him in. And I remember coming home back to Baltimore from Ohio, and I had burned my hand. And so I kind of, it was during the holiday season, so it worked out. And my mom and dad, as the nurses, the good nurses that they were, they treated my hand and all that stuff. And I remember that while I was in the bed, Smokey would just come in and just lay in the bed with me. And he would actually lay in there for hours, right? Just lay in there for hours and was having a conversation with my dad. My dad said he knows that there's nothing he can really do except give his company. That was powerful for me. That was a powerful moment, like recognizing that the instinct that they have. And while I don't want anybody saying, oh my gosh, he's comparing us to dogs. That's not it. But there's lessons that we can always learn from nature, right? But it's the idea that, you know what, I may not have everything I give. Like my dad said, best I got may just be my time. When you think about it, there's 168 hours in a week, right? There's not a lot of time. One of the most valuable asset that we have is not money, because at the end of the day, you can make more of it. You can spend too much of it, but time, you never get it back. And so time is very important. So one of the things I want to encourage you all as we're thinking about what are some ways that I can actually starting this week that I can actually use to really get over that concept of being a fraud, of thinking I'm a fraud, is take the time. One of the things I'm going to try actually as we're finishing out this year is what I call Sunday night wins. And Sunday night wins is an opportunity where you can set a designated time every week where you as a family just get together and you start doing some check-ins, right? Real check-ins. And one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that a lot of times we as a culture tend to focus on negativity, right? We tend to gravitate towards that. We like the drama. But one of the things I have found is that we can totally reframe that and we can actually start focusing on the positive things. Because actually, when you start thinking about it, there's more positive things that happen than negative. It's just that we always hone in on the negative. We always tend to remember those more. And so one of the things that I challenge you all to do is, hey, once a week, and I call them Sunday night wins because Sunday I think is just a nice organic day to do it, where you get together and say, all right, what's one win from this week that you just had? And then what's one thing that you need support with for this week? What do you have coming down the pike that we as a family can rally around you and we can actually help you with? And then while you're at it, you can also say, what's one thing you want me to be praying with you about? And what that does is that allows your home to become a place that's focused on encouragement and not on negativity. And it just creates a different atmosphere in the home. And it gives fathers a simple way to create structure and to celebrate progress. One of my fondest memories that I have is that my family growing up, before we would actually go out for the day, we would always have family prayer. And I know there were times where it was just like a nuisance because sometimes we wouldn't be up. We had to get out of bed for family prayer. But I honestly believe that there was some dangers, seen and unseen, that my family was protected from because we started the day being covered with intentional prayer, right? And so there's something about that just connection with your family and being intentional about it. So maybe that's another tool that you can do is just really be intentional about that family time, right? So you got the Sunday night wins, you got the family prayer. And here's a third one, the one question, right? And this is something that you can do daily. My son goes to a school where we actually have to take him. He doesn't take the bus or anything. We actually have to take him. And so this is a great opportunity when you drop him off or actually after the day when you pick him up, say, hey, tell me about one thing that happened. What's the best part of your day? Or what made you smile today? Or where did you feel challenged today? Maybe you could ask, how can I support you better this week? That could be a part of the conversation as well. But what I like about that is it allows you to really listen to not only the things that are being said, but the things that aren't being said. Listening is a very powerful tool in communication. As a matter of fact, when you think about it in communication, we don't really spend time with the listening part, do we? But it is a communication event. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you have to know is that we aren't natural to listening. Yes, there's hearing, right? That's for those of us who are blessed that we actually have the functioning of our ears. And when things go in, my mom says it goes in and out the other ear. That's hearing. It just happens, right? You pick it up. But listening is when it actually goes in, and I like to say it likes to hang out. And it's there. And what's powerful about listening is that we have to actually learn and grow into understanding how to do it. That's why when you're really listening, especially for a long period of time, it can be actually exhausting because it is very intentional. But that listening is extremely important because then what that does is that helps give you intel for how you really can support your family. Other thing is it lets them know, you know what, he genuinely is interested in what it is that I'm saying. At the end of the day, our family members want to know that they're seen. They want to know that they're heard. A lot of times drama comes up because they feel as if, you know what, you just don't understand. Yes, life was like what it was when you were growing up, but this is not how it is for us. I need you to listen. So one of the things that I challenge you all is you want to do those things so that you can create a culture without pressure. Right? Now, if you're willing to do that, make sure you let me know in the chat. You know what? I got this. I want to do this. I want to hear about that. Matter of fact, you can go ahead in the chat and let me know. You can hit me up privately. Feel free to email me or DM me in whatever platform you watch this and just let me know, Dr. Mike, I tried these things out. Or Dr. Mike, I need some help on maybe some ideas of how to do it. And I would be more than glad to see what I can do to help assist with that. Now, with that being said, the last little piece that I want to give you all, and this one really blessed me a lot, is the idea of identifying as a leader begins with identity as a son, right? Men often lead from insecurity because they never healed the little boy inside. I'm going to say that again. Men often lead from insecurity because they never healed the little boy inside. And what happens a lot of times is we see ourselves as performers and not as sons, right? A performer needs applause to actually feel appreciated. A performer is rewarded for their performance. A performer always has to be on. A performer actually collapses under the right amount of pressure. But when you think about a son, doesn't need applause because he knows who his father is. I'm gonna say that again. A son doesn't need applause because he knows who his father is. He knows who his identity is found in. And so what I want you to start thinking about is identifying as a son. A son leads differently than a performer, right? A son receives grace. A son lives from acceptance. One of the things that happens as a son is that there's a level of entitlement that comes along, right? You know that regardless of how daddy may feel about some things you do, you're not going to leave me. You're not going to forsake me. And I think sometimes we need to be reminded of that, is that there's a father who wants to take care of us. There's a father who wants to love on us. There's a father who wants to make sure that we are okay. And yes, sometimes we have to be disciplined. Sometimes we act a little grown and we do the things that we're not supposed to do. But at the end of the day, we know that he's going to take care of us. And the family, if you're trying to earn what God already gave you, you cannot lead your family if you're trying to earn what God already gave you. So with that being said, one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to think about what is it that you're going to take away from this? What is something that you're going to do? Are you going to have a 15-minute device-free conversation with a family member this week? When you do that, you don't have to have any agenda. It really doesn't have to be that deep. It really does not have to be a planned out format. It just literally could be a drive up the street to go to the grocery store and pick up some stuff for dinner. It really doesn't have to be that deep. But here's the key. You're there to listen. Presence is power. And that's going to be your superpower for this week. So I want you to hear me out. You do not have to be perfect to lead your family, brother. You just have to be present. The kids are not wanting you to be a superhero. They are waiting on you, the real you, the one who listens, the one who tries, the one who keeps showing up, even when he's unsure. God did not call you to be a flawless father. He called you to be a faithful one. He wants you to be one who leads from grace, not from guilt. You're not a fraud. You are a father. You are a man who wants to see the best for those that you care the most about. You're going to be intentional about doing those things, makes it a safe space, a safe place for your family, for your spouse, for your children, for those who are closely connected to you. And you may be saying, you know what, I got to get my whole house taken care of. And I want you to know, you know what, Your job right now is not to fix your whole house. Your job is to take it one step, one intention at a time, and then let God do the rest. Everybody, I want you to make sure that you're reaching out. Let us know how much this has been a blessing to you. What are some other areas that you think you would love to hear us talk about? Make sure you email me at michael@newheadspacemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you still haven't gotten your one-click mindset, guess what? Let me know. All right. Let me know. We'll figure out how we can get a copy to you and we can do those things that we need to do because guess what, y'all? We got some work to do. With that being said, here's Dr. Mike. Thanks for tuning in.